Hey everyone, Michael Album here from Roofstock. And I want to talk to everybody today about how I got started in real estate, what it's allowed me to do, and some of the benefits that it's afforded me over the years that I've been investing. First and foremost, why did I get into real estate investing? Well, I think like so many investors out there, I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I read that at about the time I started working as a professional fire protection engineer in the commercial property insurance industry. And I thought, I've got this great salary, and then I got my take-home pay. And I said, whoa, there is a lot coming out of that. And so I just wanted to make additional income. And I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and then I started the self-education process, learning what it took to become involved in owning rental real estate. And so I bought my first property after a couple years of self-education. And it provided me with a couple $100 a month in cash flow. And I said, this is incredible. If I can do it once, I can do it 10 times. And that was my original plan, was to purchase one property a year over 10 years. And the cash flow that was going to afford me was hopefully going to be able to allow me to leave my job. And that was the ultimate goal at the end of the day. It started out to be a supplement. And then I said, well, if it could be supplemental, why can't it be the full salary? I first figured out that real estate was actually working for me a couple years after I started investing. So I had stayed on my track of buying one a year for the first 3 years. And it wasn't until I owned that really second, but realistically third property that I realized, holy smokes, this is actually working. Because I was making a little bit of cash flow every month on the first two rentals, but I still had to put a couple dollars into them. And I've shared on the podcast, my first rental property, I had human feces get smeared on the property on the way out with some upset tenants. And so that took a pretty big blow to my reserves as well as to my ego and my thoughts around investing as a whole. So when I got that third property, it was a triplex actually out of state. That's when I really started to see some pretty significant cash flows from those properties. And they were all going in the same bank account. And so I felt like that bank account was getting turbocharged with the amount of dollars sitting in it at the end of every month, even after I paid all my expenses. So that's when I really started to even think about paying myself from the rental income that I was making. Because up until that point, I hadn't touched it. So I was thinking, okay, well, I'm making some real dollars here. Why don't I start paying myself a monthly salary, so to speak, so that it really feels like this is starting to get me somewhere. And then I'm using those dollars to live my life in my everyday spending. So that way I can start to feel what it's like to, if I can eventually leave my job, what it's like to be supported on rental income alone. So after those first couple years of investing, when I started to figure out, okay, this is actually working, I really started to focus on moving it from a supplemental part of my income to the main source of my income. And that has allowed me to do some pretty incredible things in my lifetime, which I'm so thankful for. So first and foremost, it allowed me to leave my job. So in late 2019, I asked the company I was working for, I was working as an engineer, I needed some mental time to kind of refresh because actually my father passed away. And I said, you know what, I just need some time to kind of do a hard reset. Can I have 6 months off and I'll come back and pick up where I left off? And they said no. And I said, okay, then I'm leaving. And it was because of rental real estate that I had the financial backing to be able to do that. I didn't really want to at that stage in the game, but I said, this is something that I need for me. I'm going to prioritize myself. And so I was able to walk away. And my wife and I at the time were able to travel internationally for the better part of a year. And I was doing some consulting, some freelance work on the side. But I was majorly funding our life and our travels with rental real estate. And to be able to pick up and leave and tell the company that you're working for or the boss you work for, I don't actually need this job, I was staying here because I enjoyed it personally, is a pretty powerful thing. A lot of people will call it FU money, where if someone does something you don't like or says something you don't agree with, you can basically say, I'm out. I don't need this job. And so that for me was so impactful and so empowering that I said, this is something I would like to do more of. And this is also something I want to help other people get to feel and experience. I think it's really important to highlight and focus on goal setting. Because for me, when I first got started, it was just get that first property, hopefully make a couple $100 a month in cash flow. And I think that's a totally acceptable goal. So many of us want to figure out what are we going to do in 10 years or in 15 years or what the end looks like. And I do think there's a lot of merit and value to doing that because it allows you to reverse engineer and work backwards into, okay, well, if I'm trying to get here, this is the roadmap that gets me there. But for a lot of us that are just starting out, that might be really overwhelming and that might feel like too far off in the future. And so I would say to everyone that feels that way, just get started. Pick a goal that feels tangible and reasonable for you based on where you are. And that could be get your first rental property. That could be get your first rental property and makes $100 a month cash flow. That could be get your first property that breaks even in cash flow if you're not someone that is really in the hunt for cash flow. So again, it's making the goal reasonable and relatable to where you are, because so many of us hear these massive stories of these huge portfolios, massive cash flows, and think, well, that could never be me. And it's also important to think about and realize, what is it going to take for you to get started, both in terms of mental capacity and experience and knowledge, but also in terms of usable dollars. So again, for those people that have these massive portfolios that are talking about multi-million-dollar deals, that might be really tough for us who are just getting started to wrap our heads around. So instead, why don't we think about just getting to one, getting from 0 to 1. I need my 20% down, which is going to cost me X amount of dollars, which is going to be saved in X amount of time because I'm budgeting and saving this many dollars every single month. That's going to get me my first one, which is going to cash flow Y amounts of dollars every single month. And then I'm going to use that to snowball into additional properties. Once you start doing that, you'll actually get so much knowledge and experience around just doing a deal and being involved in real estate that your goals are likely going to be way different than if you had made this set defined plan to begin with. So that totally happened for me. I said, I want to buy 10 properties, one a year over the course of 10 years to own 10 properties. Well, after year 3, I was like, screw that. I can buy these way faster, out of state, multifamily, and scale much quicker, which is going to lead me to my cash flow goals so much faster than I had anticipated or ever thought possible. So again, important to have goals, but let's be realistic around how we're setting them and what we're thinking is reasonable. So all of this is to say, I just want to encourage everyone to just get started. I think you will be pleasantly surprised at how far you're able to go on your own. And so don't think and don't measure yourself against other people, because everyone's starting from a different place and likely trying to go to a different location. And so we shouldn't be comparing ourselves against other people. We should only be comparing ourselves against ourselves. Because at the end of the day, as cheesy as it is, that's who's competing. It's you versus you. So again, just get started. As long as you're putting one foot in front of the other, making forward progress, you're headed in the right direction. You're gonna make mistakes, that I can almost guarantee you. So don't worry about making mistakes because they're inevitable. Just worry about failing forward. I hope you enjoyed this video. As always, feel free to leave us a comment down below. We love hearing from you. We look forward to seeing you on the next one. Happy investing.